Japanese for absolute beginners, featuring my bathroom mirror. In Japanese, we have 5 vowel sounds. A, I, U, E, O. A, I, U, E, O. A, I, U, E, O. A few example words are ai, which means love, ie, which means house, ao, which means blue, and ue, which means up. In the next lesson, we'll learn the rest of the Japanese alphabet. In the last lesson, we learned that Japanese has 5 vowel sounds. A, I, U, E, O. For the rest of the characters, you simply combine a consonant sound with a vowel sound. For example, this character would be ka, this one would be ki, ku, ke, ko. There are a few characters that don't completely follow this rule. For example, this character is pronounced shi, so this column would be read sa, shi, su, se, so. This character is pronounced chi, and this character is pronounced tsu, so this column would be read ta, chi, tsu, te, to. This character is pronounced hu. It's kind of a combination of an F and an H sound. This column is pronounced da, di, du, de, do. It's a soft T sound, kind of like in butter. This character is pronounced o, just like the vowel sound o. And this character is pronounced n. In the last lesson, we covered the 46 characters in the hiragana alphabet. But Japanese actually has 3 different alphabets, and in this video, we're going to cover the second one, katakana. Katakana follows the exact same sounds and patterns as hiragana, they're just different characters. We mostly use katakana for loan words, which are words that originate from other languages. For example, cheesecake means cheesecake. We may also use katakana to add emphasis on a word or phrase, kind of like how in English we may use the bold or italics font. See if you can guess what these katakana words mean. Hamburger, computer, TikTok. In the next lesson, we'll go over what these little marks mean. In the last few videos, we went over the hiragana and katakana alphabets. In this video, we'll cover these little marks that you often see above the characters. This one is called a dakten or tenten, and this one is called a handakten or maru. The dakten adds voicing to the consonant sound. What this means is the k sound turns into a g sound. Notice when you make the sound k and g, your mouth stays the same shape, but with g, your throat vibrates a little bit more because you're adding voice to the sound. The characters in these 4 columns can have a dakten added to voice the consonant sound. So for example, this column, ka, ki, ku, ke, ko, can be read as ga, gi, gu, ge, go. These characters can be a bit confusing because these 2 characters are both pronounced ji, and these 2 are both pronounced zu. Adding a handakten to this column turns a consonant into a P sound. Pa, pi, pu, pe, po. In Japanese, there are short vowels and long vowels that can change the meaning of a word. For example, obasan means aunt, whereas oba-san means grandma. Here's another example. Kirei means pretty. Notice that to extend the e sound, you add the character i to the end. Another word is arigato, which means thank you. To extend the o sound, you would add the character u to the end. However, in some words, you would use the o character to extend the o sound. For example, oki, which means big. In katakana, you would simply add a line to extend the vowel. So for example, keiki means cake. Let's take a quiz. Which of these words do you think I'm saying? Kiite, kesu, hoshi, oji-san, sakka. Answers in the comments. In Japanese, there are short consonant sounds and long consonant sounds. For example, kite, kite, which means come, and kitte, kitte, which means stamp. To make a long consonant sound, you simply add a small tsu character, which simply adds a short pause before the next character. Kitte. Here's an example in katakana. Sakka. Let's take a quiz. Which of these words am I saying? Akka, hatta, soto. In the last lesson, we learned about the small tsu character. In this video, we'll learn about the small ya, yu, yo characters. Adding a small ya to a character basically removes the previous vowel and replaces it with that ya. So this character originally is ki, but with the small ya, it would be kya. The same applies for yu and yo, so this would be read kya, kyu, kyo. You can also do this with any of the vowel characters, a, I, u, e, o. So for example, this character here is te alone, but with the small I, it becomes ti. You mostly only see this in loan words such as T-shatsu, which means t-shirt, or Andy, which is my name, Andy. With that, we've gone over all the basic rules for hiragana and katakana. It was a lot, I know. In the next lesson, I'll be introducing you to kanji. In the last several lessons, we went over the hiragana and katakana alphabets. In this video, we'll be going over kanji. Kanji are basically Chinese characters that were adopted into the Japanese language. For example, this character, which means water, in Chinese would be pronounced shui, while in Japanese it would be pronounced either mizu or sui. The way you pronounce a kanji character depends on the word. For example, this character is pronounced mizu in the word mizutamari, but the same character is pronounced sui in the word suibun. There are over 2,000 kanji characters that are used in modern Japanese, so happy memorizing. Now that we've covered the Japanese alphabets, let's actually learn some words, starting with numbers. This is how you would count to 10 in Japanese. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. By the way, you can also say shi instead of yon for the number 4, and shichi instead of nana for the number 7. Now you can play hide and seek in Japanese. Let's learn about names in Japanese. In Japanese, we usually say the last name, then the first name. Here are some examples of anime names. Uzumaki, Naruto, Midoriya, Izuku, and Kurosaki, Ichigo. Western names are generally referred to by their first name, then their last name. For example, Eren Yeager, Gon Freaks, and Edoardo Elric. In Japanese, it's common to refer to someone by their last name plus a title. For example, Tanaka-san. We'll talk more about titles in the next video. Let's talk about Japanese titles. In Japanese, we usually refer to people by their name and then a title. Here are some common Japanese titles. San is a generic title similar to Mr. or Mrs. in English. Chan is basically a cute way to refer to someone, so it's usually used with girls, young children, and really close friends. Kun is more masculine and is usually used with boys and young men. Senpai refers to someone who is older or more experienced than you. And sensei usually refers to professions like teachers, doctors, and authors. There are some cases where you might refer to someone without a title, which is called yobiste, for example with close friends or family members, historical or public figures, and in some cases, foreigners. You should always use a title when meeting someone for the first time. When in doubt, simply use san. In this lesson, we'll learn about how to say I or me in Japanese. There are actually a lot of ways to say I or me in Japanese. We'll just go over some of the more common ones. Watashi is a gender-neutral and polite way to say I or me, and it's mostly used in more formal contexts, although some people use it in casual conversation as well. Watakushi is just a more formal way of saying watashi, and it's usually used in like business settings. Atashi is a more feminine way of saying I or me. Ore is the most masculine way you can refer to yourself. Boku is also a masculine way to say I, but it's generally used by people who are more soft-spoken or intellectual. Jibun is a little less common, but it literally just means I or myself, and it's gender neutral as well. Lastly, we have uchi, which is generally used by girls from the countryside or in certain dialects like the Kansai dialect. In the last lesson, we learned how to say I in Japanese. Now let's learn how to say you. The most polite way to refer to someone would be to simply say their name and their title. For example, Suzuki-san. A casual way of referring to someone is anata, or even more casual than anata is anta. Kimi is also a casual way to say you. Omae is a rude way to say you, but some people use this in casual context as well. Teme is just flat out a rude and disrespectful way to refer to someone. And lastly, kisama is just a really offensive way to say you. From my experience, you might hear a lot of these versions of you in TV shows or anime, but in normal conversation, we mostly just refer to people by their names. Let's learn how to introduce yourself in Japanese. Saying your name in Japanese is super easy. All you have to do is say name desu. For example, my name is Andy, so I would say Andy desu. A lot of people ask why you don't pronounce the U sound in desu. In Japanese, it's pretty common to drop the U and the I vowel sound. When you meet someone for the first time, you would greet them by saying hajimemashite. Hajimemashite. Hajimemashite literally means the first time, but it's usually translated as nice to meet you. At the end of the introduction, you would say yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu means pleased to make your acquaintance. Hajimemashite, Andy desu. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Let's talk about how to say where you're from in Japanese. To say where you're from, you would say place, kara kimashita. Kara means from, and kimashita means came. So if you're from America, you would say Amerika kara kimashita. If you want to say what state you're from, you can say Amerika no state, shu kara kimashita. Shu means state. So for example, I'm from Utah, so I would say Amerika no Utah shu kara kimashita. I'm from the state of Utah. If you want to say what city you're from, you can replace shu with shi, which means city. So for example, if you're from Paris, France, you can say フランスのパリ市から来ました。どこから来ましたか? Where are you from?